Zelensky's statement about Putin's success and victory amid talks with the American delegation in the Kremlin, which began close to midnight and following the events in Davos. Details: a new step towards peace. For the first time in a long time, a trilateral meeting, representatives of Moscow, Kyiv, and Washington at the same negotiating table. Russia's offer of a truce. What are the conditions? Assaults, arrests, searches, and a conspiracy, an attempted coup. Special forces raided 11 sites at once. Who was planning the overthrow of the government? A prison colony for calling for Putin's destruction and punishment for wanting to be like him. Russia and Great Britain at the center of the scandal. A Kremlin admirer and hater under close scrutiny. French special forces and London support. Seizure and assault of a Russian vessel. Moscow announces an escalation strategy. Macron sends a signal to Putin. Kazakh-style occupiers and accusations against mothers. Russia suddenly declared that the mass deaths of infants were the fault of mothers, not doctors. Watch to the end about this and more. Hello, friends. This is Vremya Priyadko. Short, clear, and to the point about what the world is talking about. I'm getting started. A prison sentence for a comment about Putin's destruction. A wheelchair user was sentenced to 5.5 years for his words on Telegram. The Central District Military Court in Yekaterinburg sent Alexander Krichevsky, a system administrator from Izhevsk, to prison. He was found guilty of incitement to terrorism for a comment on Telegram in which he wrote about the need to destroy Putin and his FSB entourage in order to live peacefully with our neighbors. The comment was left in 2024 under a post by Chechen opposition blogger Tumso Abdurakhmanov. Investigators deemed these words a direct call to assassinate the president and security forces. Krichevsky himself pleaded not guilty. He claimed he was speaking figuratively, did not call for violence, and does not support terrorism. But the court was unconvinced. Here's what the telegram said. Alexander Krichevsky, Russian citizen, Izhevsk. That's why we listen to him, because he's not afraid, a ray of freedom in the kingdom of darkness. And we will only destroy this darkness together when we understand that we have one enemy, Putin and his FSB clique. You and we must destroy this enemy so that we can live as peaceful neighbors. In his final statement, Krichevsky said his life was ruined by 3 winter Thursdays. The day he was arrested, the same day his mother, who needed care, was sent to a nursing home. Another Thursday, his mother died while Krichevsky was in pretrial detention. And the third Thursday, January 22nd, was the day he was sentenced. Punishment for wanting to be like Putin. Another high-profile scandal, this time in the UK. Former MEP and Police and Crime Commissioner Rupert Matthews is under investigation after asking a serving police officer to arrange a photo shoot for him in the style of Vladimir Putin, shirtless and riding a horse, replicating a photo of Putin from 2009. The private correspondence was leaked. The case is now being handled by his colleagues. The charges include possible abuse of office and an attempt to involve a police officer in political advertising. Matthews, a former MEP who wrote books about UFOs, ghosts, and the paranormal, left the Conservative Party in 2025 to join Reform UK. His office claims he is terrified of horses and would never work with them on his own initiative, according to the Daily Mail. Matthews himself accused the leakers of breaching confidentiality and stated that the scandal undermines trust in the oversight system. Border alert, air targets in the sky, Polish air defense forces on high alert. The operational command of the Polish armed forces reports that suspicious activity has been detected over the Polish-Belarusian border, drones in the sky. Small drones have been circling in the border zone. Military radars have been tracking them continuously and have not detected a direct threat. However, Polish authorities have stated that this is part of a hybrid operation by Belarus, aimed at destabilizing the situation and testing the readiness of the Polish air defense system. Warsaw states that the eastern border is currently under enhanced control, the army has been put on constant alert, and the skies are under close surveillance. The operational command of the Polish armed forces, together with subordinate forces and assets, is monitoring the situation on the country's eastern border in real time and is on constant alert to ensure the security of Polish airspace. Europe must be able to defend itself. Undoubtedly, the world press continues to follow the negotiations between the US, Ukraine, and Russia, as well as the statements by Zelensky, who literally lashed out at his allies the day before in Davos. He accused European countries of weakness, an inability to stop Moscow, and a timid response even to US threats to seize Greenland. The most alarming remarks were directed at NATO. Zelensky questioned whether the alliance would respond if Russia struck Lithuania or Poland, according to the New York Times. His statements could jeopardize Ukraine's relations with the continent, which throughout the war remained a reliable source of financial, humanitarian, and military aid, especially after the U.S. reduced its involvement under Trump. Zelensky's speech was a direct and frank list of what he considers Europe's failures in exerting geopolitical power compared to the United States, which, according to him, acted decisively. Several other resonant statements were also made. Zelensky's statement about Putin's arrest and Putin's victory in Davos. Zelensky stated that the Kremlin had essentially managed to fool Europe and that it was Putin who was now deciding how to dispose of Russia's frozen assets, a reference to Moscow's recent announcement that it was prepared to spend some of those assets on Trump's peace council and use the rest to rebuild territories damaged by the fighting. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, President Trump carried out an operation in Venezuela, and Maduro was arrested. There were different opinions on this matter, but the fact remains, Maduro is under arrest in New York. Sorry, but Putin is not under arrest. The largest war in Europe since World War II is already in its fourth year. And the man who started it is not only at large, but he is still fighting for his frozen assets in Europe. And you know what? He has had some success. It's true. It is Putin who is trying to decide how Russia's frozen assets should be used, and not those who have the power to punish him for this war. Zelensky also made a statement about Russia's heavy losses, but did not mention the Ukrainian losses. On the sidelines of the forum, a meeting with Trump took place, which ultimately sent a signal to Moscow. Donald Trump, President of the United States. Mr. President, what will be your message to President Putin? What do you want President Putin to know? The war must end. Western media have given different accounts of the meeting between Trump and Zelensky. The Financial Times writes of Zelensky's failure. He left without committing to a post-war agreement on Ukraine, although there were previously plans to conclude it in Switzerland. Axios, however, writes the opposite. The meeting was excellent. We are in the last kilometer of negotiations. It is very difficult. The Russians must be ready to compromise, he said. Trump described the meeting with Zelensky, his last before leaving Davos, as very good. A Ukrainian official agreed it was one of their best meetings. Trump was in a good mood. Ukraine claims that after Davos, Kyiv has reached agreements on a new air defense package. And another interesting note, trilateral talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. for the first time in a long time, even at the same table, could take place as early as January 23, 24 in Abu Dhabi. Territorial issues remain a stumbling block on the path to peace, but Moscow and Kyiv could conclude a ceasefire, according to the Financial Times. And it is the U.S. that is pushing Russia and Ukraine toward direct dialogue, with both Moscow and Kyiv required to make concessions. The U.S. and Ukraine discussed the possibility of offering Russia a limited ceasefire, under which Moscow would cease attacks on energy infrastructure in exchange for an end to Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil refineries and shadow fleet tankers, according to two sources familiar with the discussions. Negotiations with the American delegation began in the Kremlin close to midnight on January 22nd, with peace in Ukraine on the agenda. Kushner and Witkoff flew to Putin after a series of meetings in Davos. And while Putin, along with Dmitriev and Ushakov, were talking with Trump's representatives, Trump himself announced that the parameters of the agreement on Ukraine. It's known that Zelensky is ready to agree to a deal, but everything hinges on the same issue that's blocking progress, likely, again, the territories. It's worth noting that the talks in the Kremlin lasted almost 4 hours and concluded just after 3 a.m. Moscow time. The U.S. delegation's motorcade left the Kremlin without any media contact. This was Witkoff's 7th visit to Putin. The main topic was war, plus an invitation to Moscow, to the Peace Council, and the fate of frozen Russian assets in the U.S. The Kremlin made no statements about any tension or failure in these negotiations. Harsh words, public innuendo, and open conflict. Zelensky is talking about a slap on the wrist for Orban. Orban is shaming Zelensky and reminding him how Budapest is helping Ukrainians. At the Davos Forum, Zelensky also lashed out at European leaders who, according to him, are trading Europe's interests for Russia's benefit. Without naming names, he dropped a direct hint. Every victor living on European money and feeling comfortable in Moscow deserves a slap on the wrist. The response came swiftly and harshly. Orban declared that he saw no room for mutual understanding with Zelensky and made it clear Hungary would not provide military aid to Ukraine. Orban also accused Zelensky of being unable or unwilling to end the war, despite U.S. aid. Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, the Ukrainian people, of course, despite your carefully chosen insults, can still count on us. We will continue to supply your country with electricity and fuel, and we will continue to support refugees arriving from Ukraine. Life itself will sort out the rest, and everyone will get what they are owed. Victor. Assault on the high seas. The Allies are moving in for the takeover. Military helicopters, special forces on deck, and a vessel under arrest. An operation with international resonance has unfolded in the Mediterranean. A tanker suspected of evading sanctions was taken under control following surveillance and coordination by several countries. French intelligence services boarded the vessel with the support of their allies, and a British ship guided it until its interception. Documents were seized, a judicial investigation was launched, and the tanker was redirected to port. Officially, the operation was carried out strictly in accordance with international law. Politically, this is a strong signal. Paris is talking about combating a shadow fleet that, they say, is financing the war against Ukraine. Macron stated that the tanker originated in Russia. Moscow stated that it is investigating whether there were Russian citizens on board the Grinch tanker and described Paris's actions as an EU strategy to escalate tensions. Emmanuel Macron, president of France. The operation was carried out on the high seas in the Mediterranean with the support of several of our allies. It was carried out in strict compliance with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. A judicial investigation has been launched. The vessel has been rerouted. We intend to ensure compliance with international law and ensure effective enforcement of sanctions. Moscow is perplexed. The president's order has not been fulfilled. The Russian Foreign Ministry says it cannot understand why Trump's promise has not yet been fulfilled, or rather ignored. This concerns the release of Russian sailors detained following the U.S. special operation involving the Russian-flagged tanker Marinera. Trump had previously decided to release Russian citizens, but the process has stalled. Lavrov's ministry openly expresses bewilderment and disappointment. Maria Zakharova, official spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry. Frankly, it is impossible to even imagine that any government body in the United States directly reporting to the U.S. president fails to implement his decisions. Moreover, it appears that they are deliberately failing to implement them and have been doing so for a long time. Assaults, arrests, and conspiracy. Security forces thwarted an attempted coup. Special forces raided 11 locations simultaneously, conducted large-scale searches, and seized knives, radios, and digital media. A 41-year-old suspect, another participant in a major government overthrow scheme, was detained. Investigators claim this was a network that was preparing for the violent overthrow of the government and the creation of its own territorial defense forces. 8 individuals aged between 38 and 63 are accused of participating in or supporting a terrorist organization. An important clarification: the German government could have fallen. According to prosecutors, the conspirators assumed that people could die during the coup, and that an influential aristocrat and investor was to lead the new state. It was later revealed that the operation took place in Saxony, and that the radical Reichsbürger movement was involved. Trials of those involved in the plot are already underway in Frankfurt, Munich, and Stuttgart. An analysis of the seized evidence is ongoing. The prosecutor's office claims that the network planned a violent coup d'etat and assumed the possibility of death. The German aristocrat and real estate investor, Prince Heinrich XIII Reuss, who was planned to lead the new state, along with other key figures, were arrested at the time. Okupas, Kazakhstani style, a scandal is brewing in an ordinary residential building in Astana. Technical floors, intended to be common property, have been converted into illegal apartments. Former employees of a service company simply moved in and have been living there for years as if they owned the property, according to a major investigation by Tengri News and Tengri TV. These new owners punched windows in the building's walls, connected to utilities, and even tried to legalize their residence through the courts. The court refused, saying such floors cannot be sold or given away. They are the property of all residents. But the Kazakhstani-style Carlsons, the publication explains, haven't gone anywhere. They often refuse to pay for electricity, entrance hallways, and common property, and try to pin the debts on other residents. When their power was cut off, it was restored with the help of officials, and the conflict only escalated. Experts say such cases exist in almost every district of the country. This is already reminiscent of the Spanish ocupas, people who seize other people's property and demand it be recognized as their own. Residents fear that if order isn't restored now, such seizures will become the new norm. But they are upset that not everyone living in the building treats it the same way and contributes to improvements. With these words, they nod toward the technical floors. They add that those who settled there should understand this, as they are former employees of the KSK, Housing and Utilities Cooperative, which managed the home and left behind so many problems. It's not the doctors who are to blame, but the mothers in labor. The governor of Kuzbas has shifted the blame for the mass deaths of infants at a Novokuznetsk maternity hospital onto the mothers. After the deaths of 9 newborns, Ilya Seredyuk declared that it was not the doctors who were to blame, but the women themselves. He claimed that many pregnant women were not monitored by doctors, did not undergo tests, and some, according to his statement, arrived to give birth while intoxicated. The children, according to the regional governor, were born extremely premature. Some weighed no more than 600 grams. Seredyuk doubted the theory of a hospital-acquired infection and effectively dismissed the theory of medical error, stating that the deceased infants had different doctors treating them. Meanwhile, the investigative committee has opened criminal cases for negligence and causing death by negligence. Ilya Seredyuk, governor of the Kemerovo region. Some mothers had no prenatal care. There's no medical history, no tests, no understanding of the expectant mother's current health. It's sad to say, but expectant mothers not only neglect their health, but some abuse alcohol and have unhealthy habits. It's certainly unacceptable for ambulances to arrive at the maternity hospital intoxicated. Seredyuk's statement has already sparked a stir. Activists are demanding he apologize, as he prematurely sided with the doctors and blamed mothers for the deaths of their own children without waiting for the investigation's findings. Furthermore, he made no mention of the maternity hospital's condition, its rating, or the medical staff's performance. Thank you for watching and for being with me every day. Have a great day. Don't forget to support me with a like, a subscription, and a comment. See you tomorrow.